Good morning, everybody. Today is Thursday, June 30th, 2016, and this is Before the First Cup with Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Thursday, everyone. It is 68 degrees and sunny here in upstate New York. Another beautiful day on tap here. I'm happy that the summer has finally made it. So where do we leave off yesterday? We titled the show CRISPR People, Church, MIT, Harvard, Parker, Gates, Google, Penn University, and the FDA. And that pretty much puts them all on a platter. I think there were a few more, but I didn't have enough room. We talked about some insane stuff over the last few weeks. Over this week, I think we've been focusing a lot on CRISPR and the fact that they are going to be CRISPRing people and who is behind it. CRISPR splicing and dicing the human genome to turn them into whatever these mad scientists think that we should be. It's very disturbing to me because once they've cracked all of the mysteries of life here on this planet, they will be able to manipulate and control every last bit of biology, and that is the plan. So what we're going to take a look at today, I promised we're going to move into the realm of brain research again, because we discovered that as part of that Broad Institute and the Weiss Institute of Biologically Inspired Engineering, both of which Church is a part of, MIT and Harvard are a part of, tech billionaires have been sprinkling money into their research to make them happen, and CRISPR has been a part of all of this, as well as robo-bees and all kinds of other mad science. They have also been a part of this brain project, this Connectome project, to map the human brain from start to finish, figure out how to pop all the buttons and zap a few little synapses to see what happens. You know, we mentioned yesterday about the lack of reproducibility in research, number one, as being a big problem. Also, the FDA allowing lots of fraudulent research to be published and never redacted or retracted. And so there really is a crisis right now as to what is true and what is not. What is real and what is not. We looked at all the things that could potentially go wrong CRISPRing humans, and one of the 4 items, and I believe it was number 4, was the influence of money in research and whether or not that was going to skew results. And of course it is. We found that many times now. When there's big dollars and big organizations behind something, they can push it through, they can fudge the numbers, they can pat some butts and make it happen. And right now, the only thing between the ability to CRISPR humans in real time and to open that Pandora's box is to find a hospital that'll allow them to do it. But we discovered there's a whole bunch of hospitals involved in that Weiss Institute and the Broad Institute that probably will be more than happy to be the facility where they make their multi-bazillion dollar new technology happen. But number 2 is the FDA, to give them approval. And remember, with that 21st Century Cures Act that they've been pushing, that is now sitting on the floor, and I never remember if it's the House or the Senate. It's passed through one of them, and it's sitting on the floor of the other. The 21st Century Cures Act will allow them to circumvent regulatory agencies. Remember, the National Institute of Health no longer approves on a case-by-case basis, quote-unquote, gene therapy. They now selectively, with their subcommittee called the Recombatant DNA Committee, selectively pick cases. The CRISPRing humans happen to be one that they picked out of a hat, and they've given it the green light. So there really isn't any type of breaks in the way right now to stop this next, I don't even know what you'd call it, the next step up in insanity that is about to hit us in the face. And I'm already seeing commercials for cures for cancer by this new technology called CRISPR. Send Nana in and get her CRISPRed up. We're going to suck out her T cells and genetically modify them and then put them back into her body and see what happens. But don't worry about it because, you know, it's phase 1 human trials, and we know that errors happen in phase 1 human trials, and being one of the desperate and potentially dying, that is a risk that we are willing to take. And they actually said that in one of the stories yesterday. So we have a couple things going on here. We have this researcher at NYU. I mentioned this yesterday. I just want to talk about this now to kind of establish how insane things are. NYU is another large, very expensive university on the East Coast. Seems to be lots of those. And I've ran into a few scientists now that have been involved in Mad Science Gone Mad at NYU. I have lots of friends who went there. I've been there many times. I've been in the dorms partying. It's actually lots of buildings right down in Greenwich Village. It's kind of cool, but not what they're doing is cool. So an NYU study gone wrong. Whoops. And a top researcher has been dismissed. Now, that surprised me. New York University's medical school has been quietly shut down. Has quietly shut down 8 studies in its prominent psychiatric research center. So, yeah, we're going to talk about brains today. And parted ways with a top researcher after discovering a series of violations in a study of an experimental mind-altering drug. But hey, they must have seen that the benefits outweighed the risks, and so it must have been worth it for these people. A subsequent federal investigation found lax oversight of study participants, most of whom had serious mental issues. The Food and Drug Administration investigators. So again, ding, ding, I have to say, this kind of got me for 2 reasons. One, NYU dismissed one of their top researchers and shut down 8 studies that I'm sure had a lot of money behind them. But number 2, the FDA actually sent in investigators, so it must have been bad. The FDA investigators also found that records had been falsified, and researchers had failed to keep accurate case histories. Now, remember, we found yesterday what could possibly go wrong CRISPRing humans. Again, lots of money and important people behind these research studies to force a paradigm or a new drug or a new treatment into the mainstream. Typically, even if there's fraud, we've found now, statistically speaking, they don't get involved. They just kind of let it slide. If it all comes out in the wash, it does. But if not, hey, we made bazillions of dollars in the meantime. And 20 years from now, like we heard with that Levaquin antibiotic yesterday that caused all those deaths and damages, a lot of these big companies knew long, long before it was published that there were issues, that they were causing damage to people. But plausible deniability, who's going to prove it? Unless, of course, someone catches you. And that doesn't happen too often. Anyway, in one of these shuttered studies, people with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, remember, that's one of these many diseases in this brain research project that they've been going after. They started with the soldiers with PTSD, Parkinson's disease they moved it into, and then they showed live brain surgery with implants for a Parkinson's patient on National Geographic to make it all okay that we are digging and delving into the human brain to try and fix it because we are so defective. In one of these shuttered studies, people with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress caused by childhood abuse, now this is a new one, took a relatively untested drug intended to mimic the effects of marijuana to see if it relieves symptoms. Now, they've been doing tests on PTSD patients with marijuana for quite a long time. From everything that I've been reading and talking to some of the researchers who were involved in some research, they had great success. So it made me kind of raise an eyebrow when they were using some sort of untested drug that mimics the effects of marijuana on these people. Why would you not just give them marijuana, since it's in New York State, it's been approved already as medically usable? We have a whole medical marijuana program, if believe it or not, here in New York State. And I think post-traumatic stress, as well as IBS and a bunch of other things, serious illness such as cancer, have all been approved as issues that can get you medical marijuana. So why would we be testing an untested drug that mimics the effects? It just makes no sense. But they wanted to see if it relieves symptoms. Of course, if we use some sort of untested drug, it probably is some sort of synthetic manufactured drug that we might be able to make all kinds of profit on and modify to do whatever we want it to do as we crack more secrets of the brain. Back to the story, quote, "I think their intent was good, and they were considerate to me," said one of those subjects, Diane Ruffcorn, 40, of Seattle, who said she was sexually abused as a child. "But what concerned me is that I was given this drug and all these tests, and then it was goodbye. I was on my own. There was no follow-up." Ding. Guinea pigs and you don't matter. It is a critical time for two important but still controversial areas of psychiatry. And remember, the former director of the National Institute of Mental Health, Tommy Insel, has gone to Verily, one of the Alphabet, formerly known as Google entities. This is the one that deals with life sciences. Tommy Insel is going to work on curing mental disease through many different facets. We're going to look at some of that today through Google. Very interesting. It is a critical time for two important but still controversial areas of psychiatry: the search for a blood test or other biological signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't know if it was the beginning of this week or the end of last week. We looked at all those new ways, which is one drop of blood funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to diagnose diseases left and right. Remember, biosensors are going to be the next big thing in the Internet of Things that will connect you and give live real-time diagnostics to whoever wants them as you become a node. But anyway, so far, finding a blood test or other biological signs of post-traumatic stress disorders so far come up empty. And the use of recreational drugs like ecstasy and marijuana to treat it. But at least one trial of marijuana and one using ecstasy are in the works for traumatized veterans, and some psychiatrists and many patients see this work as having enormous promise to reshape and improve treatment for trauma. And I thought I saw too LSD, actually. But obtaining approval to use these drugs in experiments is still politically sensitive. Doctors who have done studies with the drugs say that their uncertain effects on traumatic memories make close supervision during treatment essential. And the New York Times pieced together details of the research and the investigation through documents at NYU, letters and emails, as well as interviews with a participant and several researchers familiar with the project. The violations, quote, jeopardize subject safety and welfare and raise concerns about the validity and integrity of the data collected at your site, the FDA said in a letter obtained by the New York Times. And Dr. Charles Marmar, the chairman of the psychiatry department at NYU, said that people working with Dr. Neumeister, who was the study's lead investigator, had reported concerns about the lab's compliance with research standards. And, that's one thing that we've talked about time and time again in all these different studies. There's always the front room and then there's the back room. There's always what's on paper and then what's really happening. There's always the real results and then the money that's influencing it behind it that gets into the study. Don't believe anything hook, line, and sinker. Do your own research and start digging into it, because when you start seeing conflicting information or you start seeing people questioning and being shut down, you know that there's more to the story. And especially if it comes to any of these technologies where they're going to be able to enslave you one cell or one DNA strand at a time, or cure you, or give you new memories to replace the old ones. We looked at that way back when in DARPA research using flashes of light or pulses of electricity. There have been all these different ways that they've been able to insert and remove memories. Be afraid, be very afraid. I know I haven't said that in a long time, but it is true. Once some of these issues were confirmed, though, Dr. Maymar says the university placed Dr. Neumeister on leave and, quote, suspended all activity and suspended access to all of his accounts. I took control of these studies, says Dr. Maymar, and Dr. Neumeister later submitted his resignation. George Lederman, a lawyer for Dr. Neumeister, said that there may have been some protocol violations. Don't worry about it. But NYU has taken the position that these violations were more egregious than they believe they actually were, and the issues could have been easily remedied, he said, and noted that they did not cause the sponsor of the research. And here comes the money shot. Who was it? Oh, the pharmaceutical giant Pfizer, to shut the study down. So Pfizer kept funding it. Don't worry about it. We just got rid of that guy and put someone else in. And both the university and Dr. Lederman said that there was no evidence that any of the study participants had been harmed. So, phew, damn good thing. But as we were reading about studies yesterday, and some of the mad science gone mad, and the CRISPRing humans, and this new cancer therapy with genetically modifying patients' T cells, that all we have is the FDA in the way to approve at Penn University, that there had been another case in, I think it was 2001 or 2002, this is 1999, at the University of Pennsylvania, where someone in a phase 1 clinical trial had died getting gene therapy. And I bet they're not going to put this into the commercials that are encouraging people to step right up and become one of the cohorts in the Precision Medicine Initiative. Penn State, this is out of February 10th, 2005, so it took quite a number of years to get this all settled. Penn State to pay $517,000 in gene therapy death. 3 doctors face research restrictions, and this is in Philly.com, so direct out of the local Philadelphia newspaper. More than 5 years after the death of a teenager in a gene therapy experiment at the University of Pennsylvania, federal law enforcement officials yesterday announced a $517,000 settlement with Penn and said research restrictions would be placed on 3 doctors involved in the case. So they didn't get put in jail or anything. They just got research restrictions. The U.S. Department of Justice got involved and said that the September 1999 death of Jesse Gelsinger, 18, of Tucson, Arizona, false statements and claims were made to federal regulators about the gene therapy trial, including the misrepresentation of information that would have halted the experiment. Gelsinger's death. So, like I said, don't be 1.0. I would not be getting in front of any of these lunatics, especially when there's big money involved anywhere, because you know what? That's not going to stop the truck. You are just another lab rat that does not have any value, and especially if you have an illness that might take you out. Hey, if you die, well, it was all done in the name of trying to save humanity. Gelsinger's death was the first caused by gene therapy and greatly slowed a burgeoning field of medicine that seemed to hold great promise for treating and even curing dozens of diseases. But so far, success has been limited. So very interesting that this faux pas, I don't know if you'd even call it that, this cluster F of this 18-year-old and gene therapy happened at the very same university that now they are waiting for approval for, again, the very first gene therapy. Notice they didn't say that there'd already been one before this that went horribly awry. No. Step right up. We're going to cure your cancer. But this was a burgeoning field of medicine back in 1999. And this was when all stops were out. They were already splicing and dicing your food and making edible vaccines along with GMO tomatoes and bananas and rice and all the other crap that's already been out there that nobody ever told us about. But it put the brakes on it because this kid died. Gelsinger's death was the first caused by gene therapy and greatly slowed a burgeoning field of medicine that seemed to hold great promise for treating and even curing dozens of diseases. But so far, success has been limited, and the case raised questions as to whether scientists has acted too quickly to move gene therapy experiments from animals into people. Ding! and whether patient volunteers were fully informed about the risks of unproven therapies. And I'm going to say that informed consent has been a big issue all along because we never had informed consent about the GMO tomatoes, the flavor saver that they slipped into the food chain way back when, or any of this other stuff that's out there. Vaccines we don't have informed consent about. We've run across National Institute of Health documents that have talked about the ability for transmissibility of bovine spongiform encephalopathy into humans through bovine serum that's in vaccines. But you know what? It's okay to give it to your baby. Your doctor never told you that, even when you asked questions about it. She said you're one of those parents when you questioned what was in the vaccine and wanted the insert. She never mentioned to you that we had recombinant vaccines. We're putting DNA from all these other organisms into your pristine child who hasn't been exposed to any poisons yet, but we're going to poison your baby. Informed consent is what we no longer have. And I just saw yesterday, I don't have a story up here right now, so I'm not going to quote anything, but somebody, the woman who left the message on my show from 2 days ago, and then I saw, I think, April Bowden from Truth or Talk also posted a story about it in California. They are now mandating adult vaccines for anyone who works in the child care industry. And they are threatening penalties up to jail for people who do not comply. Now, this is one of the first cases. Don't forget, there's this Healthy People 2020 Act that's coming that's going to go after all the adults to get you up to date with all your vaccines. And they got the one of the Healthy Child Acts is up in front of either the House or the Senate for approval as well to mandate vaccines from a federal perspective, taking away the rights of the states to make their own laws. But this is one of the first cases that I remember for an adult in California to be forced to get vaccines. I know they were doing it in hospitals, but I don't think they were threatening penalties of jail and fines on healthcare workers that didn't get vaccinated. They were just threatening their jobs. But now it's not just their jobs, it's the risk of jail. How insane is this? I mean, talk about taking us toward full fascism. This is the medical technocratic complex wants to take you over, and they're going to come up with every single way. And remember, the end game that I envision, and I don't have any foreknowledge of this, but my brain just works in ways that it can go down lots of different timelines and look at the facts we have right now and then come up with all the permutations of what the potential future could be. And with these new shape-shifting immune system, quote-unquote gene therapies that, again, all those same individuals and organizations that I listed off at the beginning of the show for yesterday are involved in this. This new synthetic immune system with all of the insanity inside of it, they can go and splice and dice you. We found out yesterday CRISPR can work for 10 to 20 years once it's been inserted back into the body. And they don't know if it's going to stop or whatever. So let's get all this crazy stuff inside of us and hope we might be able to control it. But my horror vision of the future is that they're just going to take some craziness like George Church talked about, like, oh, how horrible it was that they came up with more virulent strains of bird flu in the lab that'll kill 99% of everyone who gets infected, and they publish them in public science journals. You know, something like that is going to get released. There'll be a typhoid mare or two in a big city, and it'll spread like wildfire. They practiced that with the last quote-unquote pandemic to see how fast it could spread globally. And the only cure is going to be one of these new morphing, shape-shifting, synthetic immune systems that have been financed by tech billionaires that'll save you. And if you don't step right up, well, you're going to see some horrible things. You're going to see people bleeding out their eyeballs or turning inside out, turning into one of those gelatinous masses I mentioned yesterday right in front of your eyes. So you're not going to have any choice. Either take it or die, Johnny, because that's the way it's going to be. There's not going to be any resistant consumers anymore. You know, right now we're just getting everything ramped up, and you are the R&D. But in the future, there won't be any more R&D. There'll be, hey, it's safe enough, and let's get it into everyone and do large-scale trials, not just little teeny tiny ones, and see what happens. And hey, if it all goes awry, we got way too many people on the planet, so what does it matter? It's a pretty horrifying thought. Anyway, back to this kid at Penn University, Penn, back in 1999. In the settlement of this kid having a horrible accident during his gene therapy trial, U.S. Attorney Patrick L. Meehan, and this is in 2005, said that the Penn researcher who headed the gene therapy trial would have restrictions placed on his human research for 5 years, and that he would not be barred from doing research on people. So wait, let's back up the truck. I'd be really interested to see whether or not these researchers are still at Penn. Because, like I said, how interesting that this original gene therapy research was being done at Penn in 1999. It was horrible. We paid $500,000. But hey, I'm sure if it was funded by some sort of large pharmaceutical organization, what's $500,000 for R&D? That's just a drop in the bucket. But he hasn't been banned or fired from Penn. He wasn't banned from doing human research. And 5 years from 2005 is, 2010. Well, guess what, guys? It's 2016 now. I'd be interested to know whether or not any of these doctors are involved in this new study that is going on. Anyway, they would give him restrictions placed on his human research for 5 years, but then he would also he would not be barred from doing research on people permanently. The government said that Wilson would not be allowed to lead any trials regulated by the Food and Drug Administration for 5 years. Okay, 2010, he's off the hook. And for 3 years, must have a designated monitor for any research. Okay, so even at 3 years, that's 2013. He's free and clear now. What on earth? The government also said Wilson must be retrained in how to conduct trials. Oh, bitch slap. And cannot do more than one human study at a time. Wilson also will be required to have a monitor for animal research that could influence the safety of human research. Wilson, 49 at the time, has not been involved in human research since January of 2000, according to the government. And he was considered one of the brightest stars in the field of gene therapy when Gelsinger died after being infused, with a batch of viruses genetically engineered to deliver genes to correct a liver disorder. Well, geez, doesn't this sound very similar to some of the crazy crap they're getting ready to try now? In this settlement, the government placed 3-year research restrictions, including some monitoring on Stephen E. Rapper as well, a Penn gastrointestinal surgeon, and on Mark L. Batshaw, a chief academic officer at the Children's National Medical Center in Washington, who also helped conduct the trial. Holy crap, these guys weren't small potatoes either. The medical center agreed to pay the government $514,000 to settle the case, and that payment with Penn's is double the amount of the federal funding that the researchers received for the gene therapy trial. So that is double the amount of the funding. And here's the thing. I could almost bet you now that they've changed those liabilities. So if you check that box and become part of this precision medicine cohort program, that it's going to be just like the Monsanto Protection Act. You step right up. You got informed consent, quote unquote. And if you want to give yourself to the machine to help all of humanity and you die, well, the risks were all worth it. And you help them further their research for all of humanity. I mean, I really don't see how they're going to allow these guys to be sued again, because I could guarantee you they won't. Jesse Gelsinger's father, Paul Gelsinger of Tucson, yesterday criticized the settlement, saying that there was, quote, no public accountability of what happened here. Paul Gelsinger wanted the government to demand a public apology from Wilson and order the release of all the documents in the case. These doctors were blinded by the money, ding, 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 and blinded by the prestige, ding, 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 of what they were doing, and they lost all of their perspective. And I'm telling you, we are at that point of hubris right now. Don't step up. Do not be the next one who becomes an article in Philly.com about how horrible the research went and how awry the morals have gone. Gelsinger, who settled a suit against Wilson, Penn, and others in 2000, also had hoped for an apology from the FDA. Yeah, again, that FDA, we just found out with that family of antibiotics called fluoroquinolones that include Avelox and Levaquin that cause all kinds of nerve damage and peripheral neuropathy. Also, if you're out there, Cheryl, I saw in one of the National Institute of Health documents Guillain-Barré syndrome as well as aortic aneurysm and other major disorders. You know, we had two people, husband and wife, we heard in that Ben Swan story yesterday, they were on the approval board or something for the FDA, and they made millions of dollars by approving that drug, even though the pharmaceutical companies that were producing it, and it was Bayer and Johnson & Johnson, knew all about the issues. So the FDA is not keeping you safe. And the fact that that 21st Century Cures Act wants to get rid of them completely, you know, kind of made me grit my teeth like, oh, no, the last protections are gone. But I don't think the FDA has ever been really looking out for you and me. Gelsinger, who settled the suit against Wilson, Penn, and others in 2000, and also hoped for an apology from the FDA. The FDA was caught flat-footed, and they know it by what happened to Jesse, said Gelser, vice president of an advocacy group, Citizens for Responsible Care and Research. The government said that before Jesse Gelsinger's participation, the study had produced toxicities in humans that should have resulted in termination, but the study continued. It said the patient consent forms did not disclose all the possible dangers. Ding, ding, that's the way it always goes. All those girls in that Indian study that was run by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for the Gardasil vaccine that were given a 32-page document and lots of technical mumbo jumbo to girls that can't even sign their name in India, told them to put a big red X here and say, hey, we're going to cure you of your cancer. You know, that got sick and died and whatever. There were all kinds of horrible things. There's a lawsuit now, and I don't know if that ever got settled, between India against the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for that as well. Don't put your children up as sacrificial lambs. This is all experimental science that is going on right now, and it might have always been. Remember, we tied this all back to the biological warfare program, Plum Island, Fort Detrick, and good old Nixon back in, I always forget what the name of that agreement was, but it was back in 1969, kind of ratified it. He finally inked it in like 72, saying that, no, we will no longer develop biological or chemical weapons, but we will maintain a defensive posture through the development of vaccines. Vaccines. The only way you can develop vaccines is to have the pathogen that's going to cause the illness or the pandemic or whatever. And to be able to develop vaccines, you have to be doing mad science gone mad, whether it be on humans or animals, you know, to have a defensive, quote-unquote, posture. The program never stopped, guys. This is the biological warfare program, but instead of testing it on lab animals on an offshore island, which, by the way, Plum Island has been moved right to the heartland in Manhattan, Kansas, currently right now at the university, where they said they put some sort of level 4 security so it doesn't get out. But always remember, because they're building a new facility there. But always remember that Kansas is also in the middle of Tornado Alley and the breadbasket of the world. It's a very horrifying thought. Mad Science Gone Mad has broken down the gates. And it's out there everywhere. The government said that before Jesse Gelsinger's participation, they had detected problems, but they did not end the study. They did not disclose all the possible dangers either, and under the settlement, Penn, Children's National Medical Center, and the 3 researchers did not admit to the government's allegations. No, we didn't do anything wrong, and contended, quote, that their conduct was at all times lawful and appropriate. So they did not admit any wrongdoing, of course. Reaching this agreement means that I can continue to devote myself fully and without restriction to my laboratory research, and that I may conduct clinical research when it would be appropriate for scientific advancement, says Wilson in a written statement yesterday. We really need to find out who the researchers are, because if Wilson was like the golden star of gene therapy at Penn, and they are now trying to get the first humans ever CRISPR there at Penn, I am almost going to bet you that Wilson is involved somewhere. As a part of the settlement, Wilson will publish a quote-unquote lessons learned article, be like Bart Simpson writing, I will no longer throw spitballs on the board 1,000 times. And the Gelsinger family has the right to add comments. I'd like to see that document. Penn spokesman Lori Dial said that the university will allow Wilson to return to human research. Ding. And as this investigation closes, we will reaffirm our commitment to the safe conduct of research, strengthening our resolve to continue to set the highest standards possible in this important area. And there's more, but it's really long. And I just wanted to set the stage. The FDA is not keeping you safe. It says right at the very beginning, at the very end, 2002, Wilson stepped down as director of Penn's Gene Therapy Institute, so he used to be the director. And Wilson will not lead FDA-regulated trials until 2010. So, hey, this CRISPR trial is way beyond that. And he will do training. He will be monitored in his human research for 3 years, and he will write a lessons learned journal article along with statements from the family. The family says, we wanted accountability. We wanted admission of responsibility for Jesse's death, apologies from all parties, and open access to all documents. And we received none of these things, says Paul Gesslinger, Jesse's dad. Now, one more thing, we've talked about stem cell therapy and being able now to use stem cells scraped off your hands and chemically induce pluripotent stem cells that could be turned into any body stem cell that they are experimenting with now for all kinds of cures. They can make brain balls. They can make liver stem cells and heart and brain and all kinds of stuff to be able to cure you, or at least quote unquote cure. Out of all the technologies that I have seen, this pluripotent stem cell therapy, to me, seems like the most promising. But remember, before that, they were doing all kinds of studies also using aborted fetal cells. And there's some issues with those because they have trouble turning them off. So a lot of times they turn to cancer because they overproduce. I ran across this the other day. And just because something looks promising again, or they've done a commercial, does not mean that you want to step right up for version 1.0. This is out of MIT Technology Review from last week, June 23rd, 2016. Stem cell tourist ends up with sticky mass in his spine. What? Yeah. Stroke survivor Jim Gass wanted to be healed with stem cells, and instead they ended up hurting him. Desperate medical tourists who go abroad for injections of stem cells run the risk of ending up with tumors made of someone else's cells. And that's the other scary thing. When they were doing stem cell research before and they were using embryonic, it was from somebody else. And we've found now that there are all these different cases where diseases can be transmissible through the blood, through bodily fluids, through eating animals who have been exposed. We're looking at brain wasting diseases, specifically Alzheimer's. There's reports now that Alzheimer's could even be transmissible through blood transfusions and dental work. We have that, I don't remember what it was called. It was some sort of bovine cancer that's been in almost 100% of all the milk for 20 or 30 years, and they knew about it. But hey, you know what? It doesn't affect humans. They said in 1993 or something, back when they really didn't have the technology to even be able to say that. And now they're finding it in breast tumors. Yeah, that type of stuff. At least now with the pluripotent, where they're taking your own stem cells and coaxing them into something, at least it isn't foreign. Just like going for a blood transfusion and getting blood from the blood bank, now they're finding that they're not really screening this blood for a lot of stuff. And now they're going to be opening up the blood supply to potential people that have been exposed to HIV after 20 or 30 years of banning it. Yet they still aren't exactly sure how this stuff works. Or, it hides in the immune system. It hides in different parts of the body. It's a genetic disorder, but they're going to let you get a transfusion. It's very, very, very frightening. We are like infants in medical technology, yet they're making out that they know what they're doing and they don't. So this Jim Gass had a stroke in 2009, and he was the former chief legal counsel at Sylvania. Remember that? They were an electronics company. They made TVs way back when. He traveled to Argentina, China, and Mexico to get injections of fetal tissue, that he hoped would heal him. Now, again, this is 2009. You'd think we would have come a long way since 1999 when that Jesse Gilsinger got dinged with gene therapy. But no, 2009, they still apparently didn't know what they were doing, and especially going to other countries. I definitely have issue with that. But now in a case study published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and here, guys, this is exactly what happens. This is what the 21st Century Cures Act is all about, is to pull out any and all remaining regulatory safeties. So you can step right up. You can become the guinea pig. If things work out, great. We'll do a case study and we'll sell bazillions of dollars worth of cure. But if things don't work out, well, you gave it up for society, and we're still going to do a case study on you. In this case, in the New England Journal of Medicine, and show what went wrong. Or we're going to bitch slap the doctor and make him do a lessons learned document about how he, accidentally killed a kid and thought he was going to be saved because he was blinded by money and prestige. This is just beyond sickening. So now, case study published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Doctors at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and that happened to be one of the hospitals, if you remember, that was listed in either the Broad Institute or the Weiss Institute as being a partner. Yes, that Brigham and Women's Hospital. They reported that Gass ended up with a, quote, strange, sticky, fibrous growth in his spine. And the cells in that growth, were not his. They said, it looks like nothing we have ever seen, says John Chi, director of neurosurgical spine cancer at Brigham, to the Boston Globe. And it was stuck onto the nerves, and it had an odd consistency, unquote. I wonder if he was birthing another human on his spine. Like, oh my God. Guys, this is mad science gone mad. The Isle of Dr. Moreau. I'm trying to illustrate that. These 21st century cures that the whole federal government has gotten behind is fueling 21st century medicine, has sold you and your babies up as the rats in the petri dish. It's us that have become the R&D. How convenient back about, 3, 4, 5 months ago when they said, hey, we're getting rid of animal subjects in a lot of these labs. We don't need to use animals anymore because, we can make humans on a chip. Yeah. And then clinical trials to get you and your babies and Nana to step up. Try it out, see what's going to happen. You're desperate. You might die, but we'll give you your best chance, dangling carrot. The bizarre results are being described as a quote-unquote cautionary tale to anyone seeking treatment from, fly-by-night clinics. Yes, not the University of Pennsylvania, Not Penn U. They didn't have some genetic debacle down there. No, it's only in other countries such as China, Argentina, and Mexico. Don't go there. It's all right here in the United States. Wink. We're not influenced by bazillions of dollars and rich tech billionaires who want to live forever. No. This bizarre result is being described as a quote-unquote cautionary tale to anyone seeking treatments from fly-by-night clinics offering miracle cures in countries with few regulations like where? Oh, the United States, yes. And this is not the first such case either. In 2009, doctors reported a brain tumor in a child whose parents had taken him to Russia for injections of human fetal cells. And what is sickening is that Alphabet, ding, 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 the owner of Google's search engine, yes, Alphabet, formerly known as Google, is partly to blame for the quackery. So it's got to make you feel good that Google Ventures is an investor, along with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, in the IPO that rolled out CRISPR technology that is about to be used on patients in this first ever CRISPRing trial at Penn. But don't worry about it. Searching stem cell treatment in Google has for many years returned paid ads for shady clinics in Panama and elsewhere that promise to cure autism, cerebral palsy, and just about anything else with a dose of mystery cells. And the reason such cell treatments aren't offered in the U.S. is that there is no evidence that they work, and they would not be able to pass a review with who? Oh, yes, that pesky Food and Drug Administration. But Gass apparently spent as much as $300,000 on his treatments and travel expenses. And, you know, here's the one thing talking about these such treatments, right? So they're just about ready to use those pluripotent stem cells on the brains of clinically dead patients. I don't remember if we read 10 or 18 patients. They're going to be finding those patients here in the United States, and then they're going to be doing that research where? Well, not here. They're going to be doing it in India, where, you know, anything goes in India. That's where they're doing the development on all of the edible vaccines we read as well, because they abandoned that here in foodstuffs, and they're only doing it in green leafy vegetables now, such as lettuce. Oh, where? Yeah, at Penn again. And the genetically modified tobacco. Anyway, Gass, after a stroke, had to walk with a brace and a cane, and he told the New York Times that's when he began doing research online, finding clinic websites and stories of how a former pro golfer and San Francisco 49ers quarterback John Brody had apparently been helped by fetal stem cells. Other NFL players had also allowed their names to be used in advertisements for sketchy orthopedic treatments involving injections of bone marrow, which are offered in the United States. And after getting an injection of fetal stem cells in Mexico, Gass began suffering sharp back pains, and that's when his doctors found this strange mass growing near his spine. And since then, he's had radiation treatments to try to remove it. Gass told the Globe he still thinks that stem cell treatments are promising. I couldn't accept where I was. A life lying down in bed is not a place to be, he said. And the consensus was that stem cell therapy was going to be the future of treatment for stroke, and he had read cautionary tales, even though he didn't believe them. Well, at least now they got a case study out of it. And Stephen Hawking, we mentioned this yesterday on Larry King, said, hey, greedy and stupid people are going to destroy the world, and I am going to believe that. So where do we go from here? I don't know. Do we talk about the Internet of Things, or do we just go to some brain research? Because I think that's where we're going to go. We talked about recently these new tunable electronics. Scientists engineer tunable DNA for electronic applications. They're going to be able to use human DNA in electronic gadgets such as cell phones and stuff. They're working on this at the Biodesign Center for Bioelectronics and Biosensors. Ding, ding, ding. They want to create these little DNA nanowires to be able to use in future products. DNA may be the blueprint of life, but it's also the molecule made from just a few simple chemical building blocks. And among its properties is the ability to conduct an electrical charge, making it one of the hottest areas in the engineering race to develop novel, low-cost nano-electronic devices to be implanted in you. Now, a team led by ASU Biodesign Institute researcher Nojjan Tao and Duke theorist David Bertrand has been able to understand and manipulate DNA to more finely tune the flow of electricity through it. And these key findings, which can make DNA behave in different ways, cajoling electrons to smoothly flow like electricity through a metal wire, or hopping electrons about like the semiconductor materials that power our computers and cell phones, paves the way for an exciting new avenue of research advancement. The results, published online in Nature Chemistry, may provide a framework for engineering a more stable and efficient DNA nanowire and for understanding how DNA connectivity might be used to identify gene damage. Yes, defective humans, get your biosensors on. You don't even have to put them in you. We got them in our wearable clothing now. We'll be able to take a single drop of blood and diagnose everything that's wrong with you. We can find your gene damage and we can fix you with some of our new technologies. We can identify all the different things that we can do. Don't worry about it, because we'll even be able to tinker with your brain. Yes. Researchers, here's another story. This is from last week as well. Researchers create organic nanowire synaptic transistors that can emulate the working principles of biological synapses in the brain. Yeah. So, hey, we got these little nanowires, and we can use them in the brain as well. Team of researchers at the Pohang University of Science and Technology in Korea. Korea is one of our good Mad Science Gone Mad Science buddies. Have created organic nanowire synaptic transistors that emulate the working principle of biological synapses. Yeah, so let's make an artificial brain. And as they describe in their paper published in the Journal of Science Advances, these artificial synapses that they've created use a much smaller amount of power than other devices developed so far for brain implants, and they rival any of their biological counterparts. Scientists are taking multiple paths toward building next-generation computers, and some are fixated on finding a material to replace silicon. Others are working towards building a quantum machine, while still others are busy trying to build something much more like the human mind. A hybrid system of sorts that has organic artificial parts meant to mimic those found in the human brain. In this new effort, the team in Korea has researched a new milestone in creating an artificial synapse, one that has very nearly the same power requirements as those inside of our skull. And up until now, artificial synapses have consumed far more power than human synapses. But though it might seem that artificial creations are using less power, they do not perform the same functions just yet. So natural biology is still ahead, but not for long. You know, plus, they're having this issue of transferring information. What, like uploading yourself? Well, maybe. From one neuron to another, and these wires used by the human body are still much thinner than that of the metal kind being used by scientists. But hey, don't worry about it, because we just developed these DNA nanowires that we can tune to anything. So it might not be too much longer. Anyway, as part of this latest effort, the team placed 144 of their artificial synapses on a 4-inch wafer and connected them together in a two-dimensional mesh with wires that were just 200 to 300 nanometers on average. The idea was to test the possibility of causing these synapses to fire, either open or closed, based on information coming from a wire being sent from other artificial neurons. Each synapse mimicked the natural kind and shape as well, and they were long and thin and made of two types of organic material that allowed for holding and releasing ions. And this new artificial synapse is one more step on the road towards a computer that works in ways that are very similar to the human brain. And most believe if we ever get there, those machines will create a far more powerful thing than anything that nature has ever produced. So let's give it up, guys. And now, last but not least, the 3D printed phone. And I know phones don't seem like it, but remember, they're going to be the thing that sucks you into the Internet of Things. And 3D printing is one of those disruptive technologies that allow them to feed any info and reproduce a synthetic version like a replicator. 3D printed phones herald a world of instant electronic everything. And remember, as they're merging biology and electronics, how long is it going to be before they're printing 3D printed little brains or synapses? For the past few months, and the story was from the 22nd of June, a factory in China has been spitting out a new kind of smartphone. Inside each is an antenna that was 3D printed directly onto a plastic housing, and it doesn't sound like much. But this ability to print electronic components at a scale and speed required by the smartphone industry is new, and it has the potential to usher in a new world where sensors and electronics are embedded in everything around us. Ding, 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 ding. The technique was developed by a company called Optomec in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it is working with Lite-On in Ganzhou, China, which makes phone components for companies like Huawei, HTC, and Sony. So, guys, put on a seatbelt because here it comes. We're going to pick up here tomorrow and start looking at our being sucked into the Internet of Things and the controlling of the brain. All right, make sure you stick around. Mr. Kevin Blanche is live up next, and then there's lots of radio tonight. We have Ron live at 7 p.m. Eastern. There's a new Chuck Ocelli at 3 p.m. Eastern. This week's Behind the Woodshed with Hal at 8 p.m. And then live at 10 p.m. Eastern. Anti-Media Radio with S.M. Gibson. All right, guys, have an awesome Thursday, and I'll catch up with you tomorrow.
The Anti